The steel cuffs dug sharply into his wrists, tightening with every bump in the road. Laughter echoed off the cruiser's plexiglass divider. It was a jagged, cruel sound that carried the scent of stale coffee and pure arrogance. The two officers thought they had just nabbed a high-end car thief, a nobody in a hoodie driving a vehicle that cost more than their yearly salaries combined. They were high-fiving in the front seat, completely unaware that the man sitting silently in the back wasn't a criminal at all. He was the man who was about to sign their termination papers. This is the story of how a momentary power trip turned into a career-ending nightmare, and why you should never judge a book by its cover. The engine of the 1969 Shelby GT 500 purred into silence, the aggressive growl of the V8 fading as the driver killed the ignition. It was a beautiful machine painted a deep midnight blue, the kind of car that turned heads and started conversations. James Carter stepped out of the vehicle, stretching his back. At 48 years old, James possessed the kind of quiet, imposing physique that hinted at a lifetime of discipline. He wasn't overly bulky, but his shoulders were broad, and he moved with the fluid precision of a man who had spent 2 decades in federal law enforcement. However, he didn't look like a Fed. He didn't look like a high-ranking official. He was wearing a faded gray hoodie, comfortable jogging pants, and a pair of beat-up running shoes. He locked the Shelby with a manual click and walked toward the Iron Skillet, a popular roadside diner on the outskirts of Brookfield. Brookfield was a mid-sized city, the kind of place that was growing too fast for its infrastructure and its police force to keep up with. As James pushed open the glass door, the smell of frying bacon and old coffee hit him. It was a comforting scent. He found a booth in the back away from the windows and slid in. He pulled a folded newspaper from his hoodie pocket, though his mind was elsewhere. He was scheduled to be sworn in as the new police commissioner of Brookfield. The mayor, Paul Sterling, had hired him specifically to clean house. The department had been plagued by rumors of corruption, profiling, and laziness. James was the broom, but nobody in the rank and file knew his face yet. He had been a phantom hire, brought in from out of state to ensure no prior allegiances could sway him. Carol, the waitress with a name tag reading Carol, hovered over him, pot in hand. "Black, please." And the short stack. James smiled. His voice was deep, resonant, and polite. "Coming right up, hon." As he sipped his coffee, the bell above the door chimed aggressively. 2 uniformed officers strode in. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. It wasn't a shift of respect. It was a shift of tension. The air grew thinner. The first officer, Sergeant Vic Malone, was a man who took up too much space. He had a thick neck, a buzz cut that was a week overdue for a trim, and a utility belt that creaked under the weight of excessive gear. He walked with a swagger that suggested he owned the floor tiles he stepped on. Behind him trailed Officer Tim Baker. Baker was younger, perhaps in his mid-20s, with anxious eyes and a face that was trying too hard to mimic Malone's scowl. He was the rookie, the follower, the one who laughed at jokes he didn't understand just to fit in. They didn't sit down. They stood by the counter, scanning the room. Malone's eyes landed on the window, looking out at the parking lot, and then snapped back to the patrons. "Who's driving the Shelby?" Malone barked. He didn't ask, he demanded. The diner went silent. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. James Carter calmly lowered his coffee cup. He didn't stand up. He didn't look nervous. He simply raised a hand. "That would be me, officer." Malone turned slowly, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. He looked James up and down, processing the hoodie, the sweatpants, the dark skin. A sneer curled the corner of his lip. It was a look James had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look of a predator who thought he had found wounded prey. "That's a nice car," Malone said, walking over to the booth. He rested his hand on the butt of his service weapon, not drawing it, but letting James know it was there. "Awful nice car for a morning jog." "It's a nice car for any morning," James replied evenly. He kept his hands visible on the table. "Can I help you with something?" "Yeah, you can help me." Malone leaned in, his breath smelling of peppermint and tobacco. "You can tell me where you stole it." The diner gasped collectively. Carol, the waitress, froze behind the counter. James didn't blink. "It's registered in my name. The registration is in the glove box. My license is in my back pocket. If you'd like to verify, feel free." "Oh, I bet it is," Baker chimed in, stepping up beside his sergeant. He sounded shrill, eager to participate. "Probably printed the registration yourself, right?" "Get up," Malone ordered. "Am I being detained?" James asked. He didn't move. "I said get up." Malone shouted, slamming his hand onto the table. The coffee cup rattled, spilling brown liquid onto the newspaper. You matched the description of a suspect involved in a grand theft auto reported earlier, south end of town. James knew for a fact that there had been no bolo. Be on the lookout for a '69 Shelby. It was too rare. If one had been stolen, the radio traffic would have been specific. Malone was fishing. "Officer," James said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "I'm going to slowly reach for my wallet to show you my ID. That will clear this up immediately." "Don't you reach for nothing," Malone snapped. He grabbed James by the fabric of his hoodie and yanked. James was strong, but he wasn't expecting physical contact so soon. He stumbled out of the booth. Before he could regain his balance, Malone spun him around and slammed him face first into the wall of the diner. "Stop resisting!" Baker yelled, reciting the line as if reading from a script. "I am not resisting," James said through gritted teeth, his cheek pressed against the cold plaster. "Check my ID. My name is James Carter. I am the owner of that vehicle." "Shut up!" Malone drove a knee into James's thigh, hitting the common peroneal nerve. It was a dirty tactic designed to cause a dead leg without leaving a lasting bruise. James's leg buckled. "Cuff him, Baker. Let's take this trash to the curb." The metal clicked around James's wrists tightly, too tightly as they marched him out of the diner, leaving his half-eaten breakfast and his dignity on the table. James caught the eye of Carol. She looked terrified. "Call the station," he thought, willing her to hear him telepathically. "Call the mayor." But he stayed silent. He walked out into the sunlight, head high, as Malone and Baker shoved him toward their patrol car, unaware they were currently manhandling the highest-ranking officer in the city. The back of a police interceptor is designed to be uncomfortable. The plastic seats are hard, molded to force the body into an awkward angle. There is no leg room. When you are handcuffed behind your back, your shoulders scream in protest with every turn of the wheel. James Carter sat stoically, staring through the wire mesh. His thigh throbbed where Malone had kneed him. He focused on his breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. It was a technique he had used before raids in the FBI. It kept the heart rate down. It kept the mind sharp. In the front seat, the atmosphere was like a frat party on wheels. "Did you see his face?" Baker laughed, slapping the dashboard. He thought he could talk his way out of it. "My registration is in the glove box." He mimicked James's voice in a high-pitched, mocking tone. "They always say that," Malone grunted, glancing at James in the rearview mirror. He made eye contact, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Think because they put on a fancy car, they can fool us. I know a drug dealer's ride when I see one. Shelby GT 500, please. Guy probably doesn't even know how to drive stick." James remained silent. He was memorizing details. Car number 402, officer names Malone V and Baker T, probable cause non-existent. "Hey, buddy," Malone called back. "You got a stash in there? If you tell us now, maybe we go easy on you. Maybe we don't impound the car. Maybe we just take the cash and let you walk." James's eyes narrowed. Solicitation of a bribe. The charges were piling up. This wasn't just profiling anymore. This was corruption. "I have nothing to say to you," James said calmly. "Oh, the silent treatment." Baker giggled. "Lawyer up, right? You know the system, huh? Been in the system a lot." "You have no idea," James muttered. Malone took a sharp turn, deliberately jerking the wheel to send James sliding across the slick plastic seat. James's shoulder slammed into the door. "Oops," Malone deadpanned. "Squirrel in the road," Baker cackled. "You know," Malone continued, his voice taking on a darker lecturing tone, "the problem with people like you is you don't know your place. You come into our town, drive your loud cars, scare the good citizens. We're the thin blue line, pal. We keep the animals in the zoo." James closed his eyes. "The zoo? That's what they called the jurisdiction." "I'd be careful with your choice of words, Sergeant," James said. It was the first time he had used Malone's rank. "Oh, you a lawyer?" Malone scoffed. "Or just a jailhouse scholar, something like that." They were approaching the precinct. The Brookfield Police Department was a fortress of brick and concrete. It was supposed to be a beacon of safety. Under the current administration, the one James was replacing, it had become a clubhouse for men like Malone. As the cruiser rolled into the secure sally port, the heavy metal garage doors rattled shut behind them, plunging the bay into artificial yellow light. "End of the line, sunshine," Malone said, putting the car in park. He got out and opened the back door, grabbing James by the upper arm and hauling him out with unnecessary force. James stumbled but caught himself. "Walk!" Malone shoved him toward the intake door. "You're making a mistake," James said. "One last chance for them to redeem themselves. If you check my wallet, you'll see a badge." Malone stopped. He looked at Baker. They both burst out laughing. "A badge?" Baker wheezed. "He says he has a badge." "What is it? A junior detective sticker you got from a cereal box?" "Security guard, probably." Malone sneered. "Top flight security of the world, right?" "Check it," James challenged, his voice hard as iron. "We'll check everything during processing," Malone said, pushing James through the door right after we strip search you. "We got to make sure you aren't hiding any contraband." The threat hung in the air. They were planning to humiliate him. They wanted to strip him, exert total dominance, and break him before he even saw a judge. James stepped into the booking area. It was busy. Phones were ringing. Officers were typing reports, and the smell of stale sweat and disinfectant was overpowering. At the main booking desk sat Sergeant Big Joe Kowalski. Kowalski was an old-timer, 30 years on the force, counting the days to his pension. He was reading a sports magazine. "What you got, Vic?" Kowalski asked without looking up. "Grand theft auto, resisting arrest, possible narcotics transport," Malone announced proudly, puffing out his chest. "Caught him at the diner with a mint-condition Shelby. Guy wouldn't ID himself." "I offered to ID myself," James corrected loudly. "Quiet," Baker snapped. Kowalski looked up over his reading glasses. He looked at Malone. Then he looked at the prisoner. Kowalski's eyes went wide. His jaw literally dropped. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the filing cabinets with a loud clang. "Vic," Kowalski whispered, his face draining of color. "Vic, what did you do?" Malone frowned, confused by the reaction. "What? I bagged a perp. What's your problem, Joe?" Kowalski came around the desk, his hands shaking slightly. He pointed a trembling finger at James. "Do you know who that is?" Kowalski asked, his voice cracking. Malone looked at James, then back at Kowalski. "Yeah, a car thief." James Carter stood tall despite the handcuffs. He looked directly at Kowalski. "Hello, Sergeant. I believe we were scheduled to meet for the briefing." Kowalski swallowed hard. "Director Carter, I didn't know you were in town yet." The room went dead silent. Typewriters stopped clacking. Phones went unanswered. Every eye in the booking room turned to the trio standing by the door. Malone froze. The blood rushed from his face so quickly he looked like a wax figure. He slowly turned his head to look at the man he had just shoved into a wall. "Director?" Baker squeaked, his voice sounding like a broken toy. James smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Please," James said softly, "take these cuffs off. We have a lot of work to do." The silence in the booking room was heavy, a physical weight that pressed down on every set of shoulders in the room. The air conditioner hummed a low, monotonous drone, unaware that the world had just shifted on its axis. Sergeant Vic Malone stood frozen. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile two impossible realities. On one hand, the man in front of him was a suspect, a nobody in a hoodie who had defied his authority. On the other hand, Sergeant Kowalski, a man who had survived 6 different police chiefs, was looking at this suspect with the kind of reverence usually reserved for funeral processions. "Director," Malone repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "Joe, what are you talking about? This guy is a perp." "Shut up, Vic," Kowalski hissed, abandoning all protocol. He rounded the desk, his keys jingling in his trembling hand. He approached James with his head bowed slightly. "Sir, I apologize. I don't have the key for these specific cuffs. They're Malone's personal set." James turned his back to Malone, presenting his bound wrists. "Officer Malone, the key." Malone didn't move. His face was flushing a deep, blotchy red. It wasn't shame yet. It was anger. He felt tricked. He felt like the victim of some elaborate prank. "Let me see some ID first." "I don't care what Kowalski says. You don't walk into my house and claim to be the king." The other officers in the room, a mix of patrolmen and administrative staff, were watching with wide eyes. They knew Malone. They knew he was a bully, but they also knew the rumors about the new commissioner. They said he was an ex-Fed, a ghost, a man who had dismantled cartels in Arizona and rooted out mole rings in Chicago. James turned his head slowly over his shoulder. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply projected his voice with a terrifying calm. Officer Malone, unlock these cuffs before I add insubordination and assaulting a superior officer to the list of felonies you've committed in the last hour. Malone's hand twitched toward his belt. Officer Baker, the rookie, broke first. He scrambled forward, fumbling at his own belt. I got it, sir. I have a universal key. Baker's hands were shaking so badly he scratched James's skin with the metal key before finally catching the mechanism. Click, click. The cuffs fell away. James brought his hands forward. His wrists were circled with angry red indentations. The skin was abraded. He rotated his wrists slowly, wincing slightly, letting everyone in the room see the damage. He rubbed the circulation back into his hands, then reached into his back pocket. Malone flinched, his hand dropping to his gun. James paused, staring at Malone's hand. Go ahead, James whispered. Draw it. Give me a reason to end this right now. Malone froze. The standoff lasted a heartbeat, but it felt like an hour. Slowly, Malone moved his hand away from his weapon. James pulled out a slim leather wallet. He flipped it open. The gold badge of the police commissioner caught the fluorescent light gleaming next to a federal identification card. James Carter, Commissioner of Police, he read aloud, his eyes never leaving Malone. And you are relieved of duty, Sergeant. You can't do that, Malone blustered, trying to regain his footing. Union rules. You can't just fire me without a hearing. I followed procedure. You fit the description. What description? James asked, stepping into Malone's personal space. James was 2 inches taller, but in that moment he looked 10 feet tall. The description of a black man driving a car you can't afford. Is that the bolo, Sergeant? There were reports of a stolen vehicle. I checked the logs before I left my house. James cut him off. There were no reports. You went fishing and you caught a shark. James turned to the room. I want the captain of this precinct down here now. I want internal affairs on the phone. And I want these two. He pointed at Malone and Baker placed in interview room 1. Separate corners, no phones, no conferring. If they speak to each other, I want them charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice. Sir, Kowalski said, snapping into action. Captain Graves is on the golf course. Get him off the course, James commanded. Tell him if he isn't here soon, he can turn in his badge at the clubhouse. Baker looked like he was about to vomit. Sir, I just followed the sergeant's lead. I'm still on probation. I didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense, Officer Baker, James said coldly. You watched him slam my head into a wall. You watched him knee me in the perineal nerve. You laughed. You mocked me. You are just as guilty. Move. Kowalski barked at the 2 officers. As Malone was escorted past James, he stopped. He leaned in, his voice a low, venomous whisper. You think this is over? You think you can just waltz in here and take my badge? I run this shift. I have friends in the mayor's office. You're going to regret this, Commissioner. James didn't blink. The only thing I regret, Malone, is that I didn't get here sooner. As the door to the holding area slammed shut on the 2 officers, James finally let out a breath. His leg was throbbing with a dull, sickening ache. He leaned against the booking desk, gripping the edge. Sir, Kowalski asked gently, do you need a medic? I need an ice pack, James said, grimacing. And I need access to the main frame. I have a feeling Sergeant Malone isn't just a bully. Men like that, they never stop at just violence. There's money involved. There's always money. Kowalski nodded slowly. You might want to look at the impound logs, sir. Malone runs the impound lot rotation. Yeah, James looked at the old sergeant. You knew? I suspected, Kowalski said, looking down at his shoes. But he's the nephew of the former deputy chief. Complaints against him. They tend to disappear. Not anymore, James said, straightening up and ignoring the pain in his leg. Show me to my office. The commissioner's office was on the top floor, a glass-walled sanctuary that overlooked the city of Brookfield. It smelled of lemon polish and stale cigars, remnants of the previous administration. James didn't sit in the leather executive chair. He didn't feel he had earned it yet. Instead, he pulled a hard wooden chair up to the computer terminal. Captain Bill Graves burst into the room. Graves was a man in his late 50s, wearing a polo shirt and khakis, his face flushed from the sun and exertion. He looked like a man who was used to 3 martini lunches and easy decisions. What is the meaning of this? Graves demanded, breathless. I get a call saying my best sergeant is in a holding cell and some maniac is claiming to be the new commissioner. James swiveled the chair around. He didn't stand. He simply rested his hands on his lap. Captain Graves, I assume you received the memo regarding the change of leadership. Graves paused, taking in James's appearance. The hoodie, the sweatpants, the demeanor. Carter? You're Carter? I am. You look like a suspect, James finished for him. That seems to be the consensus among your men. Graves wiped sweat from his forehead. Look, let's start over. I'm sure there was a misunderstanding. Malone is a bit aggressive. He's old school. He gets results. We can smooth this out. No need to make a scene on your first day, right? Bad for morale. Aggressive. James picked up a file from the desk. He had spent the last little while printing reports with Kowalski's help. Is that what we call it now? James tossed the file onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped at Graves's fingertips. That is a report from months ago, James said. A young man named Chris Bennett, honors student, driving his mother's Camry. Malone pulled him over for a broken taillight. The taillight was smashed after the stop. Dash cam footage was corrupted. They found 3 ounces of marijuana in the trunk. Chris lost his scholarship. The car was seized under civil forfeiture laws. Graves shifted uncomfortably. The drugs were there, Carter. The law is the law. The drugs were in a baggie marked with an evidence locker batch number from a raid years ago, James said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. I just checked the evidence logs. That batch was supposed to be incinerated. Malone recycled it. Graves paled. That's a serious accusation. I'm just getting started, James continued, picking up another file. Weeks ago, a tourist couple, RV, seized, $10,000 in cash confiscated as suspected drug money. No drugs found, no charges filed. But the money, it never made it to the evidence locker. It was logged as $5,000. Where's the other 5, Bill? I don't micromanage every booking, Graves snapped, defensive now. No, you just signed the oversight forms, James said. I see your signature right here. You signed off on the discrepancy report without an investigation. James stood up, wincing as his bruised leg protested. He walked over to the window, looking down at the parking lot where his Shelby sat, a beacon of blue among the drab police cruisers. I didn't come here just to sit behind a desk. Captain, the mayor hired me because this department is a liability. It's a gang with badges. You can't prove any of this, Graves said, crossing his arms. Paperwork errors happen. Glitches happen. You go after Malone, you go after the union. They'll eat you alive. You're an outsider. You have no allies here. I have the truth, James said, turning back. And I have the dash cam from my car. Graves froze. Your car? The '69 Shelby? James smiled thinly. I retrofitted it. It has a 360-degree camera system cloud uploaded in real time. Audio and video, high definition. James tapped the computer monitor. I have Malone and Baker on video discussing how they were going to teach me a lesson. I have audio of Baker asking if they should plant the stash before or after they tow the car. And I have Malone saying, and I quote, "Don't worry, Uncle Bill will cover it up like he always does." The silence in the office was absolute. A fly buzzed against the window pane. Captain Graves looked like he had been punched in the gut. The nickname, Uncle Bill, wasn't biological. It was a term of endearment for the protector of the corruption ring. Graves stammered. He was joking. Locker room talk. I'm suspending you, Captain, James said, his voice flat, pending a full federal inquiry. You will surrender your gun and badge immediately. You can't do that, Graves shouted, his face purple. I have 30 years and you'll spend the next 30 in federal prison if you don't shut your mouth and do exactly what I say, James countered. I'm not just the commissioner, Graves. I'm sworn in as a special deputy U.S. Marshal for this task force. I have jurisdiction that supersedes your little fiefdom. Graves slumped. The fight went out of him. He reached to his belt and unclipped his badge. He slammed it on the desk. You're making a mistake, Carter. This city, it eats Boy Scouts like you. We'll see, James said. Get out. As Graves shuffled out of the office, looking suddenly old and frail, James sat back down. He rubbed his temples. He had cut off the head of the snake, but the body, Malone and Baker, was still thrashing in the basement. He needed a confession. He needed them to turn on each other to ensure the charges stuck. The video was good, but a witness testimony was better. He picked up the phone and dialed the extension for the booking desk. Kowalski. Yes, Director. Bring me the rookie, bring me Baker, and bring me a cup of coffee. It's going to be a long afternoon. Interview room 1 was a bleak box of cinder block and despair. A single steel table was bolted to the floor. Officer Tim Baker sat on one side, his leg bouncing nervously. He had been sitting there for hours. No one had spoken to him. The silence was designed to let his imagination run wild. The door opened with a heavy clank. James Carter walked in. He had changed. He was no longer wearing the hoodie. He had found a spare police windbreaker in the office closet and pulled it over his t-shirt. It gave him an official, terrifying silhouette. He carried 2 files and a cup of coffee. He set the coffee down for himself. He didn't offer one to Baker. James sat down, opening the file. He read in silence for a full minute, ignoring Baker. Am I under arrest? Baker finally squeaked. James looked up as if surprised Baker was there. Under arrest? Not yet. Currently, you are under administrative review, but the district attorney is on the other line asking me why I shouldn't charge you with kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, and filing a false police report. Baker swallowed hard. Kidnapping? We arrested you. An arrest without probable cause is kidnapping, Tim, James said softly, using the officer's first name. It was a psychological tactic, create a false sense of intimacy. And since you transported me across district lines to get to this station, it could technically be considered federal. Baker looked like he was going to cry. It was Malone. He's my FTO, field training officer. I have to do what he says. If I don't, he fails me. I lose my job. So you were just following orders? James asked. History has not looked kindly on that defense, son. James leaned forward. Here's the reality. I have the video. I know about the fund. I know about the skimming from drug busts. I know about the fake overtime. Baker's eyes went wide. I never took any money, I swear. Malone offered it, but I never took it. That's good, James said. That helps you, but it doesn't save you. James tapped the table. Malone is in the room next door. And here's the thing about bullies, Tim. They are cowards. When the heat gets turned up, they point fingers. Right now, I have a detective in there telling Malone that you are the one who tipped us off. We're telling him that you came to us weeks ago wearing a wire. Baker gasped. He'll kill me. He'll certainly try to pin it all on you. James nodded. He's going to say you were the one who wanted to pull over the Shelby. He's going to say you escalated the force. He's going to say he was just trying to rein in a rogue rookie. That's a lie, Baker shouted, standing up. He's a liar. He's the one who targets the nice cars. He has a deal with Vance's Towing. They kick back 20% of the auction fees to him in cash. James's face remained impassive, but internally he smiled. There it is, the tow yard connection. That was the missing piece. Sit down, Tim, James ordered. Baker sat, breathing heavily. You're telling me that Sergeant Malone is running a racketeering operation with Vance's Towing? Yes, everyone knows it. Well, the inner circle knows. He targets out-of-towners, people who can't come back for court dates. They seize the cars. The judge, Judge Walter Benson, signs the forfeiture orders without reading them, and they auction the cars a month later. They split the cash. James wrote down the name Judge Walter Benson. The corruption went deeper than the precinct. It was in the courts. This was a massive win. And why me? Because it was a Shelby, Baker admitted, shame coloring his voice. Malone said a collector would pay $200,000 for it. He said you looked like a thug who wouldn't be missed. James felt a flash of cold anger, but he pushed it down. I see. James closed the file. Tim, you are going to write a statement. You are going to write down everything you just told me. Every car, every dollar, every name. Will I go to jail? You're going to lose your badge, Tim. That's inevitable. You're not cut out for this job. You don't have the spine for it. James looked him in the eye. But if you give me everything, and I mean everything, I will speak to the DA. Maybe you get probation. Maybe you get a chance to start over doing something else. But if you lie to me, or if you leave anything out, I will let Malone throw you under the bus, and I will drive it. Baker grabbed the pen. I'll write it. I'll write it all. James stood up and knocked on the door. Kowalski opened it. Watch him, James whispered. Don't let him stop writing. James walked into the hallway. He felt heavy. The corruption was systemic. It wasn't just a few bad apples. The tree was rotten. But now he had the chainsaw. He walked to interview room 2. He didn't need to interrogate Malone. He didn't need a confession from him anymore. He just wanted to look him in the eye one last time before the handcuffs went back on. This time for real. He opened the door. Malone was sitting back, arms crossed, looking smug. He clearly thought he could wait this out. Well, Malone sneered. You done playing dress-up? My union rep is on the way. James leaned against the doorframe. Your union rep isn't coming, Vic. I just got off the phone with the union president. Once I told him about the federal investigation into the RICO case involving Vance's towing and Judge Benson, well, let's just say the union isn't interested in defending a felon. Malone's smug expression shattered like glass. What? Baker talked, James said simply. He gave us the ledger. He gave us the tow yard. He gave us the judge. Malone stood up, his fists clenched. That little rat, I'll kill him. You won't be killing anyone, James said. You're going to be processed. Then you're going to be transferred to the county jail. General population. I imagine there are quite a few men in there who lost their cars and their freedom because of you. I'd suggest you keep your head down. Malone lunged. It was a desperate, stupid move. He threw a wild haymaker at James. James didn't flinch. He stepped inside the punch, blocked the arm with a fluid motion, and swept Malone's legs. Malone hit the floor with a bone-rattling thud. Before Malone could scramble up, James had his knee in the center of Malone's back, the exact same spot Malone had kneed him earlier, but with precision rather than brutality. He grabbed Malone's wrist and twisted it behind his back. You have the right to remain silent, James whispered into Malone's ear. I suggest you finally start using it. The sun had long since set over Brookfield, but the lights on the fourth floor of the precinct were blazing. The city below was asleep, unaware that its power structure was being dismantled piece by rotten piece. James Carter had not gone home. He hadn't changed out of his windbreaker. He sat at the head of the conference table in the war room, a secure briefing area usually reserved for high-stakes homicide cases. Around him sat a team of 4 federal agents he had called in from the regional field office, along with Sergeant Kowalski, who looked both exhausted and energized for the first time in years. The statement from Baker is a roadmap, James said, projecting a digital map onto the wall. But a roadmap isn't a conviction. We need physical evidence to tie the judge and the tow yard together. Agent Rachel Jenkins, a sharp-eyed forensic accountant from the FBI, tapped her laptop. I've been tracking the financials since you sent over the names. Vance's towing is washing money, but they're sloppy. They have a recurring consulting fee going to a shell company called Blind Justice, LLC. Guess who the registered agent is? Judge Benson's wife, Kowalski guessed. Close, Jenkins smirked. His mistress, Veronica Hayes. She's a 24-year-old lifestyle influencer who bought a condo in Miami last week with cash. James nodded. That's the link. We have probable cause. We hit them simultaneously, James commanded. If we hit Bernie first, he calls the judge. If we hit the judge, he warns Bernie to burn the books. We go at dawn. Bernie Vance, the vulture, was not a morning person. He was a man who lived in the greased margins of the night. He owned Vance's Towing and Recovery, a sprawling lot of crushed metal and despair on the industrial edge of town. Bernie was in his trailer office counting a stack of cash that smelled of mildew. It was the proceeds from a recent auction of 3 C's sedans that had been processed by Sergeant Malone earlier in the week. Bernie was a large man, shaped like a pear that had been left in the sun too long. He wore a greasy jumpsuit and chewed on an unlit cigar. He heard the crunch of gravel outside. Baker is early, Bernie muttered, shoving the cash into a hollowed-out safe disguised as a mini-fridge. He grabbed a baseball bat from behind the door just in case. He kicked the door open. Yo, kid, you got the... Bernie stopped. It wasn't Officer Baker. Standing in the midst of the early morning, flanked by 10 heavily armed tactical officers, was James Carter. Behind him, 2 black SUVs idled with their lights off. Bernie Vance, James asked pleasantly. Who wants to know? Bernie gripped the bat. Get off my property. This is private land. I know the chief of police. The chief is currently suspended, James said, stepping forward. And Sergeant Malone is currently in a holding cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashes with his complexion. Bernie's eyes darted to the side. He was looking for a way out. There was only the fence and the Rottweilers. I don't know what you're talking about, Bernie spat. I run a legitimate business. We know about the auctions, Bernie, James said, his voice cutting through the morning fog. We know about the kickbacks. We know about the rigged bidding process where you sell $50,000 cars to your cousins for $500. You got a warrant? Bernie sneered. James raised his hand. Agent Jenkins stepped forward and slapped a thick packet of papers against Bernie's chest. Search and seizure, James said, for the premises, the accounts, and the digital records, and an arrest warrant for you. racketeering, grand larceny, and bribery. Bernie dropped the bat. It clattered on the concrete. I want to make a deal. We're not making deals with the fence, Bernie, James said, cold as ice. We're just here to take out the trash. As the agents swarmed the lot, cutting locks and seizing computers, Bernie was cuffed. He watched helplessly as a flatbed truck from the U.S. Marshal Service rolled in to begin towing the tow trucks. The irony was poetic. At the same time, the Honorable Judge Walter Benson was enjoying his morning espresso in the breakfast nook of his colonial mansion. He was a man of refined tastes, silk robes, imported coffee, and a belief that he was the god of his own small universe. He was reviewing the docket for the day on his tablet. More forfeitures, more revenue. He needed the cash. Veronica wanted a boat to go with the condo. The doorbell rang, a heavy, authoritative chime. Benson frowned. "Margaret," he called out to his housekeeper, "see who that is? I'm not expecting anyone." He heard the front door open. He heard voices, low, serious voices. Then the sound of heavy boots on his hardwood floors. Benson stood up, his face flushing with indignation. What is the meaning of this intrusion? I'm a judge of the Superior Court. James Carter walked into the kitchen. He was followed by 2 state troopers and a federal agent. "Good morning, Your Honor," James said. "I apologize for interrupting breakfast." "Who are you?" Benson demanded, tightening the sash of his silk robe. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," James said. "You're the man who signed hundreds of illegal forfeiture orders in the last couple of years. You're the man who ruined the lives of college students, tourists, and working families to fund a lifestyle you can't afford on a government salary." Benson laughed. It was a nervous, brittle sound. "This is preposterous. I sign what the police bring me. If there are errors, that's on the department. We have the ledger from Vance's towing, Walter," James said, dropping the first name. "We have the wire transfers to Blind Justice, LLC, and we have your mistress, Veronica Hayes, currently being interviewed by the FBI in Miami. She's very chatty. Turns out she doesn't want to go to prison for money laundering." Benson's face went white. He slumped back into his chair, the espresso cup rattling in its saucer. I can explain," Benson whispered. It was a lapse in judgment. I was pressured by the police, by Graves." "Save it for the jury," James said. "Walter Benson, you are under arrest for corruption, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft." "You can't arrest a judge in his own kitchen," Benson stammered, tears forming in his eyes. "Watch me," James said. As the troopers hauled the weeping judge out of his mansion, passing the neighbors who had gathered on the lawn to watch the spectacle, James felt a vibration in his pocket. It was a text from Kowalski. Subject, "The Shelby message. We found it. It was in Bernie's private garage. He was stripping it for parts. We stopped him in time. Just a few scratches." James let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The car was safe, but more importantly, the city was waking up to a different world. The auditorium of the Brookfield Police Precinct was packed. Every officer, detective, and civilian employee was present. The air was thick with tension. Rumors had been flying all night. They knew Malone was gone. They knew the captain was gone. They knew the judge had been dragged out of his house. But they didn't know what came next. Was everyone fired? Was the department being dissolved? The murmur of the crowd died instantly as the side door opened. James Carter walked onto the stage. He was no longer in the hoodie nor the windbreaker. He was wearing his full-dress uniform, midnight blue, perfectly tailored, with the 4 stars of the commissioner gleaming on his collar. He moved with a grace and power that commanded immediate respect. He stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. He let the silence stretch for a long moment. "Yesterday morning," James began, his voice amplified by the microphone, deep and resonant, "I walked into this city as a stranger. I was assaulted. I was profiled. I was arrested by men wearing the same uniform you are wearing right now." A ripple of unease went through the room, heads lowered. "I sat in a cell while officers laughed," James continued. "I watched as the very people sworn to protect the innocent plotted to steal from them. It was shameful. It was disgusting. And it ends today." He gripped the sides of the podium. "Captain Graves is gone. Sergeant Malone is gone. Officer Baker is gone. They are facing prison time. But I know they didn't act alone. I know there are people in this room who looked the other way, who saw the corruption and said nothing because they were afraid or because they just wanted to fit in. James scanned the room, making eye contact with random officers. "I'm not here to fire everyone," James said, his voice softening slightly. "I know that most of you became cops because you wanted to help people. I know the system beat that out of you. I know you were told that metrics and seizures were more important than justice." He pointed to the back of the room. Sergeant Kowalski was standing there looking uncomfortable but proud. Sergeant Kowalski stood up. James said he was afraid. He knew the risks, but he did what was right. Effective immediately, Joe Kowalski is promoted to captain of the precinct. A gasp, then a smattering of applause that quickly grew into a thunderous ovation. Kowalski turned red, nodding his thanks. "We are going to rebuild this department," James announced over the applause. "We are going to return every single dollar that was stolen in the last few years. We are going to return every car. We are going to apologize to this community door by door if we have to." He paused. "If you are here to be a bully, leave now. Turn in your badge at the door, no questions asked. But if you are here to serve, if you are here to be the shield for the weak, not the weapon against them, then stay and let's get to work." No one left. Later, the snow was beginning to fall on Brookfield. The city felt different, lighter. The Brookfield scandal had been national news. The trials were ongoing, but the evidence was overwhelming. Malone had taken a plea deal to testify against the judge. Judge Benson was looking at 20 years. James Carter pulled the Shelby GT 500 into the parking lot of the Iron Skillet. The car was pristine again, the scratches buffed out, the engine humming a low, happy note. He walked into the diner. The bell chimed. "Carol!" James called out. The waitress looked up from the counter, her face lit up. James. Just James, please." He smiled, taking a seat at the back booth. "The usual?" she asked, grabbing the coffee pot. "Please." "And Carol?" "Yeah, I have something for you." James slid a thick envelope across the table. Carol opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $12,000. "What? What is this?" she asked, her hands shaking. "I looked into your file," James said gently. "Years ago, your son was pulled over. They took his car. They framed him. It was Malone. This is the refund, plus interest." Carol covered her mouth, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I don't know what to say. We struggled so much after that." "You don't have to say anything," James said, taking a sip of the black coffee. "It's justice. It's just a little late." He looked out the window at the snow falling on his car. He saw a patrol car drive by slowly. The officer inside waved at a pedestrian. The pedestrian waved back. It wasn't a perfect world. There would always be bad days. But in Brookfield, for the first time in a long time, the good guys were actually winning. James smiled, finally relaxing his shoulders. He took a bite of his pancakes. They tasted like victory. And that is the story of how two arrogant officers arrested their own boss and brought down an entire empire of corruption. It's a powerful reminder that titles and uniforms don't make the man. Character does. James Carter showed us that true strength isn't about how loud you can yell or how hard you can hit, but about standing up for what's right. Even when the odds are stacked against you, what would you have done if you were in James's shoes? Would you have revealed your identity immediately? Or would you have waited to see how deep the rot went, just like he did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. The steel cuffs had long since come off, but the memory of that morning still lingered like a bruise that refused to fade. In the end, James Carter's story wasn't really about a fancy car, a wrongful arrest, or even the dramatic takedown of a corrupt empire. It was about something far deeper and more human. The quiet power of character when everything seems stacked against you. We all face moments when the world judges us by appearances alone, by the clothes we wear, the color of our skin, the car we drive, or the neighborhood we come from. In those moments, it's easy to feel small, powerless, or filled with rage. Yet James chose a different path. He didn't explode in anger. He didn't reveal his authority right away to humiliate the officers. Instead, he let the truth unfold naturally, with calm dignity and unbreakable integrity. He absorbed the pain, the humiliation, and the injustice, not because he was weak, but because he understood that real strength lies in patience, wisdom, and doing what is right even when no one is watching. His story reminds us that true leadership isn't loud or flashy. It's steady, principled, and rooted in moral courage. It shows that one person's refusal to stoop to the level of their oppressors can topple entire systems built on fear and greed. Most importantly, it teaches us never to judge a book by its cover, because the quiet stranger in the hoodie might just be the one who changes everything for the better. Life will test you. People will underestimate you. Systems may try to break you, but if you hold on to your character, your truth, and your humanity, justice has a way of finding its path, sometimes in the most unexpected and powerful ways. Let James Carter's journey be your reminder. The world may see the surface, but what truly defines you is the strength you carry inside. What about you? Have you ever been misjudged or faced injustice simply because of how you looked or where you came from? How did you respond, and what did it teach you? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one and would love to hear from you. If this tale of quiet courage and hard-won justice moved you, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel grow. And if you want more inspiring stories that touch the heart and challenge the soul, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thank you for being part of this community. Together, we keep reminding the world that character still matters.